Hey, Nick Darr here with Business Over a Brew. Pleased to shoot this episode at the Old Bakery Beer Company here in Alton. As a lot of you know, the location where we used to shoot the show, Great Rivers Tap and Grill, decided to close down as businesses do sometimes, and kind of left us scrambling a little bit, looking for a location to shoot our next episode. And on very short notice, we called Lauren at Old Bakery here, and she was immediately said, "Sure, come down and shoot it." So just very generous of them to let us use the space on such short notice to shoot the show here. It's a really terrific business. They really run a great place here at Old Bakery. And it's a good fit for our show too, because they're a great business and obviously they serve brew and make it here. So it's a terrific place to have it. If you haven't had lunch here or dinner, I highly recommend you do that. The food is terrific. The beer selection is great bourbon selection as well. So it's just a great place to hang out in a historic building here in Alton. So come check out Old Bakery Beer. And thanks again to Lauren and everybody for letting us have the show here at Old Bakery in Alton. Welcome to Business Over a Brew. I'm your host, Nick Darr, the show where we talk business with some of the Riverbend's most interesting and influential business people. And a special guest today, pleased to be joined by Megan Tyler with Sacred Spaces of Care. Megan, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Tell us a little bit, let's just start with just a little bit about Sacred Spaces of Care and what you guys do.
Okay, so Sacred Spaces of Care is really a passion project for me. I've been in education my entire life, and so that's kind of where we're at with like an educational advocacy piece in the community related to anything trauma rooted. Mm-hmm. So mental health, substance use, working with the unhoused population, really whatever essential needs you have going on. We're just kind of here to walk alongside individuals and families. Seeking support in those areas is a difficult decision in the first place, lots of steps with that, and then trying to navigate those systems. And so that's kind of why we're here, is to try to walk alongside individuals during that process.
Was there a personal situation that triggered the going into this or starting this?
Yeah, it's kind of a comprehensive. I mean, I've worked in a lot of high trauma settings. Mm-hmm. I've had some of my own mental health struggles and some substance stuff, but I've had people close to me that I love that I've also walked through that journey with, and then other families and that have children involved from an educational piece. And so it's kind of a lot of different factors that have kind of led to it. But I specifically just felt like there was a need in the community, and my goal was to kind of see what exists and not really duplicate, but find what those gaps were. And so that's what we attempted to do with this.
What are some of those gaps that you found?
So those gaps are that we have resources available. I wish I could say they were entirely adequate. We're mm-hmm. under-resourced, but we do have some. And so, you know, with mental health and substance use and anything related to trauma, it's uncomfortable. It's kind of messy. People, you know, it's highly stigmatized.
Sure.
So just having that courage and feeling like, you know, you're not alone in it, and having somebody to kind of support you through that's really just a friend and like a peer. Because a lot of times you're getting a lot of opinions, or they could be professional opinions, or, you know, people suggesting things. But, you know, when you're in that moment, you are your own best advocates. We're trying to equip people to be that, but, you know, support them along the way, if that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely. I really like to get into the details of the days and weeks leading up to starting it. What was going on?
I don't know. Most people probably would kind of question my own sanity. It was a lot.
Anybody that starts a business or a nonprofit, I think.
Yeah, I was
gotta be a little bit off.
Yes. I was still teaching full time. I wasn't really sure. You know, it was a several year like vision for me that kind of evolved and ebbed and flowed. So, you know, along that process, I was journeying with people that were speaking into it, that have lived experience mm-hmm. and you know, therapists and other things that were kind of giving ideas. And so, you know, it doesn't look exactly what my first day vision looked like. Right. And even with my current board and as the organization, you know, it will grow and evolve. We have this, you know, mission that is very clear, but we really should be letting, you know, the need dictate kind of where we're moving, if that makes sense. So it was a lot of work, a lot of, you know, eat, sleep, breathe, everything from the development side of it, paperwork and 501c3 applications, and just, you know, structuring the business side to like, what does this look like in practicality? What are those needs? What kind of partners do we need alongside us? You know, and working full time. And then we may get into this in a bit, but we have a partnership with the Alton Police Department. And mm-hmm. so that entire time, like 6 months before the organization was really into implementation, I was already putting in hours there, getting to know the officers, doing ride-alongs with them, just building relationships that were like leading to us getting started.
Sure.
So,
well, while we're there, let's talk about
Yeah.
that partnership. I know you were on the radio with Chief Ford talking a little bit
Yes.
about it. So how did that come about, first of all?
That came about, really, we had gotten to the point where Sacred was going to incorporate. We had a board of directors, and it was happening. And I actually reached out to him just more from like an awareness. Hey, this is who I am. This is what we are and what we're hoping to do in the community. If you want to be part of that. But it wasn't even, I'll be honest, an invitation at first. It was just, I want you to be aware of what we're trying to do and
Right.
what that might look like. He is very mental health minded, already had some programs established within the police department, and is also very conscious about engaging individuals in crisis in the community. So if you talk to him about it, it was kind of like a no-brainer. He was like, this sounds great. We've been looking for something like this, especially with someone who will follow up with individuals. So officers are often, engaging in crisis and trying to, connect to resources, but do they actually pursue those resources and get the support they need from there? And so he just felt that was just a really great partnership opportunity, and that's kind of how that came about.
It had to make you feel a little bit validated and like, hey, man, we must be on the right, we must be doing something right here.
Yes, absolutely. And that partnership has just been tremendous, really, with just, propelling things forward. It obviously takes us, straight to the need. Law enforcement engages hundreds of calls every year that are what they call crisis intervention related, that typically are rooted in that trauma, substance use, unhoused, those essential needs types things. Some of them are not even crime related, but they have to respond. And
Right.
so, this just works. It gets us right to the heart of, who's really in need in a continual way like that. And then of course, like, we can work with anybody that just reaches out that wants to, be on some type of journey towards, asking for help. So.
Sure. Talk about the ride-along program and how the mechanics of that and how that works.
So I don't want to speak without somebody else here to verify this, but I think anybody actually can request to ride along with the police department. That's open to the community, and you just fill out an application, and it just gives you that kind of inside perspective. For me, there's just a lot of things, internally within the first responder community that the general public just really isn't aware of and doesn't kind of grasp.
Yeah. Right.
Not only from like the typical things like the safety, the danger, but for me, being so embedded in the world of trauma, the chronic trauma they experience over the course of their career with, horrific scenes that they encounter and investigations that they have to do. It's similar to our military, serving overseas
Sure.
and coming back, and PTSD, and those images and smells and sounds, they don't leave you, right? And so processing trauma is really important, because burying it leads to a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms usually.
Yes.
But the ride-alongs were just a great opportunity for me to just get to know them as humans. That's what I love the most. That's actually become incredibly important to me internally within the department. We do have a grant right now that we're working on that focuses on officer wellness and suicide prevention. There's becoming more death by suicide in the first responder community than there are line of duty deaths, which is huge. So because of all of that, the trauma. So, so we work a lot on officer wellness internally as well, in addition to outside in the community.
I think a lot of times who we become as adults kind of starts off at a younger age.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about just you personally at a younger age. Is this something you thought you might go into, or was there an event that you can remember, or?
Not really at a younger age. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a teacher since I was incredibly young. I had a lot of experiences with kids, and I just have that, I don't know, that innate thing that makes me want to educate. And I'm a learner. Like, I'm a lifelong learner myself, just always in schools or trainings or
Right.
certifications, and just trying to soak everything in. So, but as I progressed in my own career, I was always very compassion driven and need driven, and my entire educational career has been in high trauma or high needs, where I've worked mostly with, even if they were younger kids with disabilities, learning disabilities, emotional disturbances, and worked with families that are in, that constant state sometimes of just trying to survive and figure out the next step versus thrive, and so that obviously impacted me over the years. And then it's taken me in different avenues with mental health and substance use and, from there on.
And then, the other side of that is how much, unfortunately, when there's a trauma, if you are as a young person, sometimes that creates more trauma.
Absolutely.
It's tough to break that cycle. How do you?
Yeah, I mean, that's where you really need a lot of layered support. And our organization does some training on trauma, especially, I don't know if everyone's familiar with ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, is actually things that you can identify from your childhood that are just, traumas that the average population doesn't necessarily deal with. And we all try to compare trauma, to that it has certain degrees. But the thing about trauma is we could go through the exact same incident and you process it and have effects that are entirely different from mine.
Sure.
So some people look at it as in, oh, well, I haven't, experienced extreme violence or assault or abuse, but I try to help people understand, if you've lost someone you love, then you're dealing with grief. That's a type of trauma. It really touches everybody. And so that's part of that stigma, shifting the mindset that we've got to open the dialogue and talk about these kinds of things because we all can benefit from processing that better.
So it sounds like maybe dialogue is one of them. What are some other tools, techniques, and tactics to deal with trauma?
Yeah, I think, obviously ensuring that you do get some professional, support. I'm never going to pretend to be the most highly qualified person. I'm operating more from education and advocacy and my lived experience, but I'm not a clinician. So obviously there's certain degrees of support that are needed that you do, need that type of support. But, in addition to that, I think it's all about layered support. The individuals that I'm trying to help, it's very multifaceted. It's hard to focus. People don't understand the correlation between your physical health and your mental health and sleep habits and nutrition and all these types of things that go into impacting your mental health. And so, the thing that's hard for me about providing strategies or techniques is it's not a one size fits all. It's very personalized. So I would say if you want to try to dig in to that trauma or to get support, working with somebody who can look at it from all of those lenses and just ask hey, what's your story? And what goals do you have for yourself? And where can we start? And then kind of layering up the support from there.
Sure. Who have been some of the biggest, whether it be a friend or partner or somebody on your team, or maybe just somebody that a podcast that you listen to, who have been some of the biggest inspirations for you in your life?
In my life, I would say family-wise, my grandma, who I lost several years ago, so that's some trauma for me, she was one of those lifelong learners, and was a constant cheerleader and encourager, but you always got the truth. And that's why transparency is so important to me. Right. And I operate from that space because I may not always have loved what she had to say, but she was going to speak truth to me, regardless. And that's just something that's a pillar of kind of what I stand on. So from a family perspective, and my family is just hugely supportive. I hate to even just mention her, my parents, my brother, my two girls, honestly, who are now 14 and going to be 16 in a few months, have taught me more. I tell people all the time, I think they take better care of me than I take care of them. They just, I don't know, being a parent, and they're just awesome. I'm incredibly grateful and lucky. They just teach me a lot. Professionally, there's just been so many different people over my career that have spoken into me, from an educational standpoint, from a trauma standpoint. I've had a best friend who just celebrated a few months ago over 2 years of recovery after a probably almost 20-year process of addiction. And then even here most recently, Chief Ford with the police department, because he has that mindset just within the development of sacred spaces, has been absolutely instrumental in what we've been doing. So
how did you go about one of the things that a nonprofit has to do? You mentioned your board, talk about putting that together and that whole process.
Yeah. Essentially with Sacred, I just kind of thought through, who are some people that have kind of been part of this story, and then who are some people that maybe from my past I could reach out to that kind of bring different perspectives. And we have a great group. The board of directors right now, it is looking to even expand and diversify anymore. It's really important to have lots of lenses at the table, and we do have that. For the most part, we have some more like therapy, like clinical minded, and then we have some business and different legal backgrounds, but they are looking to even grow and expand that. We have 7 board members right now, which is a great number to get started.
Right.
But diversifying, it's huge for me as far as, again, having all those perspectives, making sure that there's voices at the table that really represent the community, who we're serving, who we're partnering with, that can just bring those different lenses to the table. Because I am very much a believer, like I know my limitations, and so I surround myself with people that are smarter than me on certain things, because that's, how I continually grow, and that's how I use my support system. So
that's very smart.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to do. It's a relatively new endeavor for you. What's been maybe the toughest thing about it?
It's a lot of work. So finding kind of that balance of work life and, especially growing a new organization, because, there's some benefit to, let me pour every ounce that I have into it right now, because that's only going to benefit it. Right. And you have the challenge of, especially, I feel like in this line of the nature of our work, it is kind of messy, and it's hard for people to wrap their minds around sometimes. So like getting behind it and supporting it is kind of tricky, asking for people to support it financially or to want to collaborate on it, because it's hard stuff and it makes people uncomfortable, just to be totally transparent. And so you feel like, I know how important it is to pour into it, because I want people to see the fruit of that work. So sometimes I'm sure I can struggle a little bit with like my own healthy boundaries and how much of my time and effort and energy am I giving, but I try to be very grounded with my girls and my family life and that kind of thing as well.
What do you think it is about mental health or substance abuse or that is so, why is there such a stigma about it?
I think that's a variety of reasons as well. Like you mentioned, your own past, maybe just not feeling comfortable in putting your voice out there. I think that there's misconceptions around it in general. Not having walked everybody's way of life. There's just things that you aren't going to understand unless you've walked that path or taken time to sit down and say, tell me your story and let me learn from you. We're not the best at that. We're not the best at just having dialogue where we can maybe slow ourselves down and listen for once. We're very quick to, share our side. So that's a lot of it.
I think, and it's very easy, especially in a social media age of, judging other people and maybe, but not fully understanding. For whatever reason, I've ran across a lot of people in recovery over the last few years. Ty Beckel has been a good friend of mine for a number of years now. And, he's an amazing person. Like and maybe before I got to know him a little bit better, your thought was, well, why didn't you just not do,
Yeah, and I think that's where the education piece comes in so strongly, because when you start to dig into trauma, how it affects you mentally, but even physically, when you get into like the brain chemistry research of it and what substances do to alter your brain, our brain is very malleable, which is good because that means we can also revert it back the other direction. And then just taking time to get to know people's stories, like, I think sometimes there is just pure judgment out there. Sometimes I think people judge not even intentionally, but you just don't understand until it's touched you, yourself, or it's your loved one or you that are struggling. So
it could be an unhealthy thing even about yourself, because it may, in some subconscious way, it makes you feel better about yourself, knowing that, hey, well, at least I'm not that bad.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it can be all sorts of things that just kind of, make people kind of be a little bit more closed off to it and more, reserved. So.
I know every nonprofit's looking for assistance in some way, shape, or form, whether that be volunteer of time or donations. What does your organization need right now the most?
We need people. And so we do have like event specific things if anybody is interested in volunteering. Obviously we do a lot of, over the summer we did a lot of the resource fairs that are a lot of times held outside, festivals and things like that. That'll still happen, over the course of the winter months as well. Donation wise, so one thing I want to do clarify is we're not a provider of services. We are kind of that linkage to community services. So
just directing them to.
Yeah. So it can be a kind of a good and bad. Like some people may not think that we need a lot of financial assistance or funding to make that happen because we're not like materialistic in nature.
Right.
But the amount of time and energy that you pour into just one individual or one family, you have to think about engaging them for the first time, learning their story. We go through like a needs assessment. What are some things we can help with? What are your goals? Then we start making phone calls and making those connections, and we try, it's about sustainability and about relationship. I think that's where a lot of people who start the process end up falling off, is that they have support initially to like start the process, right? But then once you've gone through it a little bit, then it's a lot of times it's a handoff. It's like, here you go, good luck, see you later.
Right.
And we're trying to follow individuals, and so that's a resource of people, of time, and so we're looking for additional funding to be able to grow our team, because that's really where the fruit of everything is.
Sure.
But there are, like I said, some other ways with resource fairs, with events that we do, on a volunteer basis, some other tangible needs that we can discuss as well. So,
what goals or directions do you have for the next year or so?
So we obviously are going to strongly continue the partnership with the police department. That's just kind of growing and getting stronger by the day, continuing to engage, the community, walking alongside individuals and families. I've been doing a lot of work recently within our youth population. So I'm part of the Madison County Juvenile Justice Council. We're looking at what types of programs and assistance are available to really support youth, especially some of the youth that are involved in violence and some of the things in the community, on how can we support better. And so, partnering with other organizations in that, it's got to be a collaborative effort. Again, it takes everybody being at the table and having a voice and, to really make an impact. So I think that will be an arena that we tend to stay in, especially again with my educational background. It only makes sense.
Sure, absolutely.
But, we're hoping to start offering, again, we partnered with Hainer Library, so we're going to be doing some free to the public, no charge trainings. We have one coming up in a couple of weeks on reducing stigma. We're working with MERC, which is Metro East Recovery Council, to do some things related to that. We're doing some mental health trauma awareness. I've become a certified instructor of mental health first aid. So there's a lot of opportunities to, again, just increase that dialogue, educate, advocate in the community, and we're hoping that the community will take advantage of those opportunities and just come out and have a conversation and learn about it.
If people want to find out more information about your work, can they do that?
Our website, www.sacredspacesofcare.org. We're on Facebook and Instagram. My personal cell phone number is on all of our stuff. I believe in that. I want people, if they're in crisis, to be able to reach out at any time. And I have, some boundaries, but I generally will, even if it's the middle of the night, if you're in crisis, I will try my best if I hear my phone. So yeah, that's the easiest way to get in touch with us.
Well, you're doing great things in the community. We really appreciate all you're doing, and thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
Anything that we didn't mention that you'd like to touch on before we wrap it up?
No, I think we're good.
All right, great.
I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Megan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.